It's fantastic to be back. I was here in November 2019 for the IMC that was at that time in Iowa City. At that time, I was amazed how you can build an exhibition out of nowhere, because I think it was just built on, on an empty field. They put some big tents and they created that giant event, which in fact, all my colleagues tell me was bigger than this one. Okay, so it's very good to be back. And in the second event, what is very nice here is what has changed is the vibrancy, I think, of the what's going to come out of India. I was really impressed. I went to several booths, and many of the Indian companies now, they're not just going to consume, the telco products from other companies, but what I feel now, and I think that's clearly the ambition of the country, is to make more of it and build more of it. So it's really good to be back and to see all of this change. So now let's talk about a little bit, one of the other frontier for the industry, which is to some extent, the edge computing. And if you think about what are, the use cases that are required, the type of application that you would put, in an edge computing, in a computing data center at the edge, these are kind of the characteristics, the main features that they have. Either you're looking for a very short, closed loop reaction time. You want to react quickly to, to some event, to some data, or you're looking to be independent of any, centralized control plane, centralized computing. You cannot depend, on centralized public clouds or even private clouds. You want it completely decentralized. And last but not least, for some of the use cases, you need to process the data close to where is it produced, because to some extent, if you backhaul all the traffic to the center of the network, is going to be more expensive overall, and in fact, it's worth to have this decentralized computing architecture. So these are the kind of, let's say, major characteristics, I would say, for edge computing applications. And if you look at the use cases, so my personal thinking, and I think that's also shared by some of the other speakers that I've seen at the event, is probably going to turn, video analytics in general is going to be, one of the biggest use cases, because it has two of the characteristics that I mentioned on the previous slide. First of all, in some of the video analytics use cases, for example, if you are talking about, checking the quality in a manufacturing plant, maybe you have to halt the production very quickly. You cannot wait because, it's rolling at high speed. So you need this fast reaction time. And secondly, we are talking about video. Video is a large amount of data, especially if you have, you need to inspect a board and you have a high resolution image. So it's probably not conceivable that you can backhaul all of the, all of the cameras, the video stream of all of the camera to a centralized location. So this use case around video analytics, there are different ways to use it, whether it's in retail, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's also, for gaming, etc., is one of those that, clearly requires, processing of data at the edge. But we're not sure. I think nobody in the industry today is sure and knows, what's going to be the killer app at the edge. We still have yet to discover that. So the first telcos, have started to invest in edge computing, but I think nobody in the industry can say, oh yeah, this is definitely the killer use case. Maybe it's video analytics for retail or manufacturing. Okay? So what does it mean? It means that since you don't know what's going to be the killer use case, and deploying something at the edge is something expensive, because you have, by definition, multiple locations. You need, it's not a centralized, by definition, decentralized deployments are more expensive than centralized deployments. So it's expensive, which means that whatever you deploy at the edge as a telco now, it has to be flexible, because you're not sure about the use case. So one of the advice that we give, to the telcos is, you should not deploy something that only can do one thing, because then there's a high risk you make a mistake about the use case. So the platform play in the edge is very important. You have, the advice we give to telcos is to deploy a very flexible platform where, you can, let's say, deploy today's use cases as well as tomorrow's use cases. And also what's very important to understand is that, okay, we are going to talk about we're talking about edge computing, which are applications running at the edge, but any application like this is going to have also a centralized part, which is either maybe hosted in a private cloud or maybe for a lot of enterprises are going to host the centralized command and control part, maybe in public clouds. But as an enterprise, and as a customer of a telco service provider, I don't want to have to deal with too many platforms. I don't want to develop my application one way because it's on the telco edge, and another way because it's going to run on a public cloud, because I have one part of my application which is also on the public cloud. Which means that the applications, okay, there is an edge computing part, but the reality is the application is going to span public clouds, private clouds, as well as many edge computing data centers. So for a telco service provider to be attractive to this type of, to enterprise, he needs to build out a platform, who is attractive to developers, because in the end, the developers are going to make these applications. And also a platform that is popular, where you have a lot of development tools, you can run a lot of databases, a lot of PaaS components, all of the things that you need to build an application, including edge applications. So the popularity of the platform is very important. And now we are going to step back a little bit and not just talk about edge computing, but in general of what's happening at the edge for a telco now and what's going to happen going forward. So what we are interested here in this session is mostly the big box on the right-hand side, which is edge computing. Okay, which is to offer, computing capabilities at the edge for enterprises, or also to develop some other, consumer applications, which requires, the low latency. But the reality is that the telco, they have to deploy other things at the edge. They have to deploy a distributed mobile core to give that low latency. You have to get out of the code and get into the app, so you have to have a distributed mobile core, that's compulsory. And the other thing, some of them, and I think, well, this whole event is about Open RAN to some extent as well, some of them will also start deploying virtualized, let's say, radio access network, the box on the left. So it makes sense as well for a telco to look at these workloads all together. So at the edge, the near edge, where typically this kind of thing is going to be hosted, you are going to see this type of deployments, okay? And instead of building one platform for your RAN, another platform, let's say for your distributed mobile core, and a third platform for your edge computing, to some extent, for cost savings, consistent operations, less learning for your own teams, it makes sense to look at, a single telco cloud platform to host all of these workloads. Now, let's unzoom further. There, as I said earlier, let's say the dark boxes here, this is where the enterprise is going to host the application. As I said earlier, there's going to be, of course, an edge computing part to the app, but there will be also a centralized part to the app, which is very likely to be deployed, on public clouds. That's what I'm showing as a public cloud footprint below, okay? And then the telco has also OSS, BSS applications. So you can further unzoom that, and again, for a telco service provider, it makes sense to offer the same kind of platform where enterprises and himself can deploy an application and run them. Again, consistent operations, faster time to market, and all these kind of things. But so the only problem, let's say, one of the big problems of a telco in edge computing is that usually telcos, they're not good at selling cloud computing. They're selling telecommunication services usually, and they are more or less good. Usually, most telcos, they're not very good at selling virtual machines, database as a service, a hosted messaging queue, hosted Kubernetes clusters. Usually, they don't know how to do that. So usually what they do for the edge computing part, most of them, in fact, they have started to do a partnership with a public cloud provider, whether it's Microsoft, AWS, or Azure. And in fact, they're doing this in cooperation because the public cloud service provider, they know how to do that, how to sell it, and they have customers already. Okay, so that's kind of no choice. Everybody is doing that. So you could say, if I want a single platform, I'm going to take everything from a public cloud service provider. That's what the public cloud service provider would like telcos to do, telco service provider. Of course, maybe that's not what you should do. There are several issues with that. First of all, it runs against the DNA. Public cloud service provider, they're very good at centralized stuff. That's where they're coming from. In fact, when we deal with them, we kind of find out they don't really want to do the edge stuff because, it's not so profitable. It's a lot of issues. Secondly, and I think this is very important to India in general, there's a problem of national sovereignty if this cloud is not made in India, or is not maybe not controlled completely by India. So there's a problem of national sovereignty. Okay. So in fact, there are other alternatives. This is what we call the open hybrid cloud. Is that in fact you can have a platform that can run natively, on servers at the edge, or that can run on top of public clouds, including of public cloud edge, like the AWS Outpost, the AWS Wavelength, etc. Okay? So, and we have cases like this. For example, well, there's a famous case of AWS Wavelength in Verizon, which is in fact deploying, have this type of partnership, but then they are also running this type of platform on top of the AWS Wavelength. Okay. Recently, in fact, Airtel also made an announcement with IBM about having a partnership using the IBM cloud to reuse the knowledge of the IBM cloud. But again, then there is also a platform that they offer on top of that, which can make enterprises independent of the public cloud, running on top. So this is, in fact, what kind of advice we give to the telco service provider. Look for such kind of platforms which can run of all of these footprints. And edge is one of these footprints, but not the only one. And this can make, your offering at least very attractive to the enterprises, because they will have the same development environment, the same runtime, on all the footprints.